This is the 8th in the UNDP Biodiversity Communications video series. In this video, we're going to be looking at the biodiversity landscape overall through the lens of a number of its critical components, projects and programs, organizations that work in the biodiversity landscape. And we're going to be looking at UNDP's Nature for Development program again overall, and specifically through the lens of a number of its critical component projects. Rosie, over to you.
Yeah, so as Ben said, we'll be looking at the biodiversity landscape, which in the research design is at a meso level, and then below it sits the Nature for Development, which is the UNDP programs within the landscape. So that's at a micro level. And the stories that were analysed in the biodiversity landscape were 10 stories that were selected because of their prominence within the biodiversity efforts and their variety. So we went for organisations that were public facing, based on finance, research or agriculture, so that we get a range of stories to analyse. And then within the nature development section, we analysed 11 UNDP headed programmes, again, with a variety so that we could focus on different story elements within the biodiversity efforts. The finding tables on the side of this slide are actually within the appendix. So if you want to read deeper, you can go to the appendix and look at it. There's also lots of other stuff in the appendix, which I'll talk through a bit later. So we found these 4 questions that can be answered through the findings of the analysis. And so what is the story trying to tell us? They're trying to tell us that we're acting to urgently mobilise and mitigate, adapt to or reverse the destructive impacts of environmental breakdown caused by the actions of humans. And what's holding the storytelling back? Well, in story terms, the choice of the protagonist and antagonist at the heart of the story aren't optimal. So in order to recruit new actors, these need to be adjusted. And what could make the story stronger? Get more people actively engaged in the story with stronger and more timely calls to action that link more directly with the challenges faced. And then how to grow the story. You've got to add hope and showcase behaviour change to help reframe and break down an overwhelming, apocalyptic and tragic story. And I'm going to hand over to Guy now, and he's going to speak a bit deeper in terms of these 4 ideas.
Thank you. Yes, what we want to do here is just bring out 3 thought points or kind of recommendations that bring to life each of the areas that Rosie's just talked about. So this idea about what the story is trying to tell us, we know that the story is huge, both in terms of the length of time that it's been told, for the last 60, 70 years, the complexity of it. And this is a barrier because very often it feels that the only way to become part of the story is a real sort of commitment of joining the tribe. This is really about values that people hold. It's about the beliefs they have. It's the kind of makeup of their identity. So it's very much, helpful for driving deep relationships, but you're either in or you're out. So it does keep some people out of the story. Another part of it is that the systemic aspects can feel overwhelming. So if we want to engage in the story, we want to feel like we can make a difference. And then sometimes that's just too difficult to feel like you can do. And also because of the longevity of this story, a lot of the things that are told today are told about how we've got to the point of where we are. So a lot of it is about the past. And actually this is less important to us because although that story is very rich and kind of colourful, it can also be sort of summed up in a sentence. And we kind of, for a lot of people, we know where we are, what we want to do. What we want to know is what happens next. And in terms of holding the story back, sort of why is that? Well, quite often this actually comes down to, so particularly within the biodiversity landscapes, the underlying business models of the people telling that story. So the need for them to sort of raise money often results in them placing themselves as the hero of the story. And that sort of restricts the ability for other people to join. Villains themselves are very often identified as very specific organizations and industries. And I guess in story terms, that sets up a very sort of clear delineation between the protagonist and the antagonist. But what it doesn't do is allow enough sort of pathway for redemption. The villain needs to exist for the hero to be relevant. And then sort of thirdly, the storytelling stops short because it doesn't connect the heroes and the villains to the underlying either kind of selfish or selfless attitudes and behaviors that we see needed being changed. And so it just doesn't have the kind of emotional depth that makes us kind of care enough to get involved in the story. So what can we do about it? What can we do to make the story stronger? The most powerful singular thing is to change who the hero is, and actually to put humans and nature together as heroes and place them at the heart of the story. With the calls to adventure and crossing the threshold moments, these are very often unclear, and actually just having sort of bite-sized, very specific calls to adventure that link to very specific challenges that are still universal across everybody's experience. So for example, capacity building, kind of bringing people in, mobilizing and kind of galvanizing a bigger community would provide a lot clearer strength to the story. And equally, I think because organizations very often put themselves as the hero, what they're not doing is then making room and giving sort of clarity to the role that other people can play, and making it clearer about who the allies are, who the mentors are, and what help they can give and what role they play in the story. Again, it's just opening up to more people. So steps to kind of grow the story, to really reinforce this point, putting humans and nature together as heroes at the heart of story will completely transform these stories. It's the kind of most powerful singular action we believe that can be taken. There is another opportunity, which is about adding motivational framing and creating more hopeful stories. And then also to sort of deal with this challenge of longevity and complexity, actually showing more successes and celebrating those in the kind of, little and often way will go a long way to kind of bringing new people in, but also showing momentum, kind of showing that the journey is likely to be successful.
So again, as with the other analytic videos, we simply have a wrap-up slide here, pulling out the key elements identified in the analysis and placing them within the 5 pillars or 5-point framework that Stronger Stories has developed to aid us all in building better and stronger stories. Oh, sorry, jumped over a slide. Rosie.
Thank you. So this is one of the more shorter videos, but the appendices is there for added information if you'd like to find out more. So there's a summary of the findings of the research. There's also all of the stories that have been analysed, so 10 from the biodiversity landscape and 11 from the Nature for Development portfolio, with some of the highlights being Friends of the Earth, the Wildlife Conservation Society and the Lion Share, who implement what a lot of Guy brought out in the analysis that you've heard today. So up next is video 9, and that is the Super Year 2020. Enjoy.